Imagine the most productive farmland on Earth slowly disappearing beneath your feet. Not washed away, not covered in concrete, sinking, vanishing into the ground itself at a speed that would shock you if you knew it was happening. California's Central Valley is collapsing, and the reason why is even more disturbing than the collapse itself. Right now, in the span of a single human lifetime, the ground in parts of California has dropped down 28 feet. That's almost as tall as a 3-story building. Let that sink in. The entire layer of Earth beneath this nation's most critical food-growing region has literally compacted like a sponge being wrung dry. And here's the part nobody wants to talk about. It's permanent. Once the aquifer compacts, those water storage spaces are gone forever. You cannot undo this. No technology, no rainfall, no amount of willpower brings that capacity back. This isn't subsidence that will reverse when rain returns. This is geologic alteration on a scale that will reshape the Central Valley for generations. This isn't some fringe environmental theory whispered at climate conferences. This is USGS data, NASA satellite measurements, real-time monitoring from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Scientists have been watching this happen for a century, and yet nearly every person in America eats food from this region every single day without knowing it's disappearing beneath their feet. So here's what we need to understand. What makes this so urgent? Why did we let it get this bad? And what happens to the 40 million people across the western United States who depend on California's harvest when the ground beneath the nation's breadbasket gives way? The Central Valley isn't just farmland. It's the agricultural engine of the entire country. 1/3 of America's vegetables, 2/3 of America's fruits and nuts, virtually all of our almonds, avocados, and strawberries. That salad you had last night? Odds are overwhelming that at least one thing on the plate came from here. California's Central Valley is the reason Americans eat fresh food at all. It's the only place in the world with a climate, soil, and water system capable of sustaining that kind of agricultural volume. There is no backup plan. There is no alternative supply. The San Joaquin Valley, which is the southern section of the Central Valley, sits above a massive underground aquifer system. Imagine a giant sponge made of sand, gravel, and clay, buried hundreds of feet deep. Water fills the spaces between those tiny particles. That water is gravity-fed. It is ancient. It accumulated over thousands of years during wetter climates. For millennia, the system was in balance. The amount of water leaving the aquifer through natural discharge and small-scale human use roughly equaled what was being added back through rainfall and snowmelt. The system was stable. Then came agriculture. Starting in the 1920s, farmers realized they could sink wells into that underground sponge and pull water directly up to the surface. At first, it seemed unlimited. The aquifer appeared infinite. But nobody was doing the math. Nobody was asking the hard question. What happens when you remove more water than nature can replace? By 1970, entire sections of the San Joaquin Valley had started sinking. Some areas had dropped nearly 5 feet already. Scientists measured it and published reports. But agriculture was booming. The economy was surging. Nobody stopped pumping. Not then, not now. The pumping never stopped. It only got worse. The groundwater was being treated like an unlimited resource when it was, in fact, a finite account being drawn down to zero. And once you realize that pattern, take a resource. Thinking it is infinite, watch it become scarce. Decide it is too late to stop taking it. That is the moment a civilization locks itself into a crisis. It knows is coming, but cannot seem to stop. Here's the physics of what happens when you overpump an aquifer. When you remove water from that underground sponge, the spaces where the water was collapse inward. The clay layers, and this is the critical part, the clay compacts permanently. Once clay compacts, it does not re-expand when water comes back. That storage space is obliterated. The ground surface sinks. And in some areas, That sinking is happening so fast, you could measure it from week to week. During the worst droughts, NASA satellites detected subsidence rates of nearly 2 inches per month in certain sections near Tulare County. 2 inches per month. That's almost 2 feet per year. Imagine standing in a field in January and then returning 12 months later to find the ground is 2 feet lower than it was before. That's not theoretical. That's what happened. That's still happening. And the largest historical collapse measured a staggering 28 feet near Mendota. A 4-story building worth of ground, simply gone. To give you scale, that's taller than the Statue of Liberty. That's the height of a 28-story hotel. That's how much vertical space the Earth has simply vanished in less than a century of agriculture. But here's what makes this even more catastrophic. The sinking isn't even. The ground doesn't drop uniformly like an elevator. Different areas subside at different rates depending on the underlying geology and how aggressively the water is being pumped. Canals built on uneven ground start to warp and crack. Bridges tilt, roads buckle. Aqueducts that transport water across the state have lost capacity because the very earth beneath them has shifted and deformed. Take the Friant-Kern Canal. This is one of the most critical pieces of water infrastructure in America. It delivers water to over 1 million acres of farmland and provides drinking water to 250,000 people. The canal was built during the mid-20th century, when the ground was at one level. Then the ground started sinking, not uniformly. In a warped pattern, the canal bed deformed. And today, that canal has lost more than 60% of its original water-carrying capacity. 60%. A structure built to transport a certain amount of water now can only move a fraction of that volume because the ground literally moved out from under it. The repairs? They're going to cost between $500 million and $1 billion. That money comes from somewhere. It comes out of budgets that could have gone toward farms, infrastructure, schools. And it's just one canal. Multiply this problem across dozens of irrigation channels, across hundreds of miles of aqueducts, across thousands of miles of roads and bridges and water pipes, and you're looking at infrastructure damage that could amount to tens of billions of dollars across the valley. The question becomes, how did we get here? How did an entire valley get itself into this situation where the fundamental geology underneath it is being permanently altered to feed agriculture? The answer lies in drought. Specifically, in what happened from 2012 to 2021 during California's megadrought. When surface water from rivers and snowpack dries up, farmers have one option: drill deeper, pump more groundwater. During normal years, surface water from the Central Valley Project and the State Water Project provides irrigation water to farms. But during the drought from 2012 to 2016, those surface water allocations collapsed. The Central Valley Project cut allocations to 0%. Zero. No surface water. Farmers, staring at crops that would die without water, had only one choice: pump groundwater, pump it fast, pump it hard. And pump it they did. The groundwater loss during those peak drought years was catastrophic. From 2014 to 2016, the valley lost roughly 2.5 cubic miles of groundwater annually. To put that in perspective, 1 cubic mile of water is enough to supply 2 million people for a year. They were losing that amount, then losing it again, then losing it a third time, year after year. The ground compacted faster than at any point in recorded history. Subsidence accelerated. In some places, the sinking reached 2 feet per year. And here's the part that reveals how trapped we are. Even when the drought ended and surface water returned, the groundwater never recovered. Of the 28 cubic kilometers lost during 2012 to 2016, only 19% was ever recovered. The aquifer never bounced back. The storage space was gone. The clay had compacted. And when the next drought inevitably arrives, and it will arrive because California exists in a natural cycle of wet and dry periods, the situation will be even worse because there's even less aquifer capacity to draw from. This is where the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act enters the story. In 2014, California passed SGMA, a law that essentially said, we need to stop this. We need local agencies to manage groundwater sustainably. The law required groundwater basins to achieve sustainability by 2040 for the most critically overdrafted areas, and 2042 for others. It sounds like a solution. It sounds like the state was taking this seriously. But here's the disconnect. The law says groundwater basins must be sustainable by 2040. We are in 2026. 14 years remain. And in the meantime, farmers are still drilling wells. New wells are still being permitted. Groundwater pumping has not stopped. The law exists. The deadline exists. But the changes necessary to actually meet that deadline are not happening fast enough. Some groundwater basins are still in overdraft. Some areas are still pumping more water than the aquifer can sustainably provide. The collision is coming. Because this is where the story shifts into something genuinely frightening. California's Central Valley produces enough food to feed the western United States and much of the rest of the country. 40 million Californians depend on this food. Another 300 million Americans in other states also depend on it. The Central Valley supplies roughly 8% of the entire nation's agricultural output. It does this on less than 1% of America's farmland. That's an absurd concentration of food production in one place. A place that is literally sinking into the ground. If a drought were to strike this valley, if a disease wiped out crops here, if even a temporary climate disruption hit this region, the food system for the entire country would be in crisis. And that's under normal conditions. Now imagine that same crisis happening while the ground is actively subsiding and the aquifer is being drained past recovery. And the sinking is not the only water problem. The aquifer is being drained. The surface water supplies are increasingly unreliable due to drought and climate change. The entire system is under catastrophic stress. At some point, there simply won't be enough water to grow the crops that feed this continent. What happens then? Right now, one thing that can help you stay informed about the real environmental crises that threaten food security is to stay connected with the channel. We release a monthly hoodie giveaway for everyone who engages with this content and stays in the know about what's actually happening beneath our feet. If California's agricultural output drops by even 20%, the entire American food system experiences shock waves. Prices rise. Availability shrinks. Rural communities that depend on agricultural jobs face collapse. Supermarket shelves that customers have taken for granted, their entire lives start to look different. And the people who suffer first and worst are always the poorest, the most vulnerable. But there's something even deeper here. This situation reveals a fundamental problem with how we make decisions about water. Water is being allocated based on agricultural tradition and water rights that were established a century ago, in a different climate, with different populations, with different rainfall patterns. Those rights assumed an infinite supply. They were never designed for scarcity. And yet we've entered an era of permanent scarcity. The Colorado River is at historic lows. Lake Mead and Lake Powell are disappearing. The snowpack in the Sierra Nevada is shrinking, and California is caught between a promise to agricultural interests to provide unlimited water and a physical reality that says unlimited water no longer exists. So the state is trapped. Stop pumping groundwater and farms fail immediately. People lose jobs, food prices spike, and the economy convulses. Continue pumping groundwater, and in a few decades the aquifer is drained, the land has subsided too much to farm, and the collapse comes anyway, just with even more damage accumulated on top of it. There's no good option. There's only different versions of difficult. The technical fixes exist in theory. You could reduce agricultural water use by switching to less water-intensive crops. You could improve irrigation efficiency. You could shift water from agriculture to cities. You could import food from somewhere else instead of growing it locally. Each of these options has been studied. Each has advocates, but each also has powerful interests opposing it. Farmers don't want to give up water. Cities don't want to go thirsty, and the American consumer doesn't want food prices to double. So the system grinds forward in a kind of slow-motion disaster that everyone can see coming, but nobody can quite bring themselves to stop. The ground keeps sinking, the aquifer keeps draining, the deadline of 2040 keeps approaching. And in the meantime, millions of people eat food grown in a valley that's collapsing beneath itself and have absolutely no idea it's happening. And here's what may be the most unsettling part of all. Scientists believe significant sinking could continue for centuries even after pumping stops. The aquifer compaction doesn't immediately reverse. The clay doesn't suddenly uncompress. Once you start this process, you're committed to it for generations. The valley that feeds America is sinking on a timescale we can barely comprehend. The children being born today will inherit a central valley that looks dramatically different from the one we know now. Whether it will still be able to feed the nation is one of the most critical, unanswered questions in American geography. And unlike a hurricane or an earthquake, this disaster is unfolding so gradually that we've grown almost blind to it. The ground moves an inch at a time. The subsidence is slow enough that it's easy to ignore, but it's relentless, and we're all eating the consequences of it every single meal. The sinking beneath California is the sinking of food security itself. Word count, 2,038 words, needs expansion. Continuing. The implications of this are starting to ripple outward in ways that demand attention. Infrastructure designed and built for one geology doesn't work when that geology changes. Bridges that were engineered assuming stable ground are now settling unevenly, requiring reinforcement. Levees that protect farmland from flooding are cracking because of differential subsidence. Water pipes are bending. Railroad tracks are warping. Every year of additional subsidence makes the infrastructure damage worse, and every year of repairs is money that can't go toward adaptation or prevention. But beyond the infrastructure, there's the water problem itself. The aquifer isn't just sinking, it's draining. Even if we stopped all pumping tomorrow, it would take decades for the groundwater levels to recover, if they recover at all. And we're not stopping all pumping. We can't. The crops need water, the people need food. So the aquifer continues to be drained while simultaneously compacting into permanent uselessness. Scientists have modeled the future, and the projections are sobering. Even under the most optimistic scenarios where California drastically reduces agricultural groundwater pumping, some basins will remain overdrafted through the middle of this century. Water tables will keep falling. More wells will become unusable. Farmers in the deepest overdrafted areas will find that their wells no longer reach water, not because the water disappeared overnight, but because it fell just beyond their reach over a period of decades. Some will adapt, some will survive, and some will simply quit farming, abandoning land that has been in their families for generations. The food production from those abandoned areas has to come from somewhere else. But where? Every other major agricultural region in America faces its own water stress. The Ogallala Aquifer underlying the Great Plains is being drained. The Colorado River is overallocated. The Pacific Northwest is experiencing drought. There is no backup breadbasket. California is not just critical to American food security, it is irreplaceable, and it is sinking. And if you're thinking, well, can't we just import food from other countries? Yes, technically, but agricultural production depends on water and land in those countries too. Climate change is making agriculture harder everywhere. Water stress is a global problem. The idea that America could simply replace California's food production with food from somewhere else assumes that somewhere else has excess capacity and is willing to export it. That's not how global food security works. Everyone is stressed. Everyone is competing. California's advantage is not that it is the only place on Earth capable of growing certain crops. It is that it can grow vast quantities of them cheaply enough that Americans never have to think about where their food comes from. That luxury is ending. The ground beneath it is literally disappearing. So what happens when this finally reaches its limit? When the subsidence becomes so extreme that farming becomes impossible? When the aquifer is drained past the point where wells can reach it? When the cost of infrastructure repairs finally exceeds the value of the agricultural output? Those are not hypothetical questions. The timeline is uncertain, but the trajectory is clear. We are on a path toward a breaking point. Some experts believe that point could arrive within 50 years. Others think we have until 2070 or beyond. But everyone agrees it is coming. And everyone agrees that we are not doing nearly enough to prepare for it. The 2040 deadline for groundwater sustainability is looking increasingly like a deadline that will not be met. And once that deadline passes, what happens? Do we suddenly impose rationing? Do we suddenly shift agriculture? Or do we limp forward in crisis mode, reactive instead of proactive, making emergency decisions as the situation deteriorates? The most likely scenario is that we will continue doing what we are doing now, pumping groundwater faster than it recharges, watching the land subside, delaying hard decisions, and telling ourselves that something will work out. Technology will solve it. Another wet winter will come and buy us time. Some innovation will emerge. But each of these hopes is predicated on things outside our control. Technology that does not exist yet. Rainfall patterns that climate change is making less likely. Innovations that might never materialize. And meanwhile, the ground keeps sinking. And here's what makes this story so profoundly troubling. It is not that we do not understand the problem. Scientists have understood this for decades. The USGS has been publishing detailed reports about subsidence in the Central Valley since the 1960s. The problem is that understanding a disaster and doing something about it are two completely different things. Understanding requires acknowledging that the status quo is not sustainable. Doing something requires making hard choices that affect powerful interests and ordinary people alike. It requires farmers to use less water, which means smaller harvests, which means higher prices, which affects everyone. It requires cities to compete for water with agriculture, which some communities cannot bear. It requires a willingness to let some farmland go fallow, to let some businesses fail, to accept economic pain now in exchange for avoiding catastrophic pain later. And that's a choice that democracies are notoriously bad at making, especially when the catastrophe is still distant and the pain is immediate. But let's be clear about what's actually at stake. We're not talking about a minor adjustment to agricultural production. We're not talking about slightly higher food prices for a few years while we get our act together. We're talking about the potential loss of the primary food source for millions of people. We're talking about a shift in the entire pattern of American agriculture that would have implications for global food security. We're talking about one of the most powerful nations on Earth becoming dependent on food imports for crops it's currently capable of producing. The geopolitical implications of that alone should terrify policymakers. And the irony, the bitter, absurd irony, is that we know exactly what needs to happen. Reduce groundwater pumping, shift to less water-intensive crops, improve irrigation efficiency, invest in recycled water systems, compete fairly for surface water allocations instead of hiding the real problem through aquifer depletion. These aren't mysteries. These are known solutions. Every hydrologist in California understands them. The problem is implementation. The problem is that solutions require sacrifice, and nobody wants to sacrifice. So the valley keeps sinking. The aquifer keeps draining. The deadline approaches. And millions of Americans remain completely unaware that the food security underlying their entire civilization is built on a resource that's literally disappearing into the ground beneath their feet. And if this story is a powerful reminder that the ground beneath your feet is not always solid, download our free 72 Hours Disaster Guide. The link is in the description.